Hello VC, ho bloody ho. This is my attempt at festive cheer, which would probably be more convincing if it wasn't for the fact I just recorded this video, went to edit it and found that actually I hadn't recorded it. Something messed up, so I'll have another go. Today I thought I'd get a video done before Christmas and New Year come around. I've been working on doing a sort of end of year roundup, and I'll get that one out probably in the new year. But for the time being, this is just a recent finds and stuff I've been playing a lot recently. So yeah, some of this stuff I've had for a few weeks, but I've been immersing myself in it, so I'd have enough to say about it. We'll start off with a band who get kind of lumped in with Italian prog. And it's a band called The Trip. This is Caront. And there's a clue there as to where they're really from. They're actually an English band, but they travelled over to Italy, I guess because prog is popular in Italy. I guess perhaps they had some gigs over there, and they pretty much stayed. And they found a couple of members, or swapped out a couple of members for an Italian keyboard player and an Italian drummer. So they are kind of Anglo-Italian. At one time, they featured Ritchie Blackmore on guitar. Not on this album. He jumped ship and went on to, I guess, greater things before this was recorded. But yeah, this came out in 1971. This is a 2022 reissue on the RCA label, so the original label. And this comes on pretty tasteful canary yellow vinyl. And it's a really nice pressing. So if you see this, don't hesitate to pick it up. They've done a really good job of it. This, it's classically influenced heavy prog. Very much in that kind of Deep Purple / Emerson, Lake and Palmer vein, I suppose. Lots of heavy guitar on here. So that's where the ELP comparison kind of falls away a bit. But there is a lot of organ, a lot of classically inspired organ, a lot of Hammond organ, some mellotron. And yeah, if you're into Purple and ELP and that kind of slightly classically influenced heavy prog, this will be right up your street. I've been really enjoying this album. At times, the guitar tone on here really reminds me of Satori by the Flower Travelling Band, which is one of my favourite albums. It really is. And yeah, the guitar tone on here has moments that really sound like that. There's a lot of great tracks on here, and it's quite hard to pick favourites. But the track Two Brothers, second track, I think, on the first side, it's got that heavy Hammond organ, it's got the guitar, great bass groove. And I forgot to mention the vocals are all in English on here, if that's an issue for you. But the vocal melody really reminds me of 21st Century Schizoid Man by King Crimson. And there's a little bit of Birth Control's Hoodoo Man in here as well. So that's a great track. And elsewhere they do a track called L'Ultima Ora, Ode to Jimi Hendrix, which couldn't sound less like Jimi Hendrix if it tried. Okay, it's rock, but it's chilled. It's got swing. It's got groove. It's organ and guitar interplay. It's definitely not Hendrix-like at all. It's more classically influenced than that. But yeah, this is a really great album. I love the artwork as well. I think that's fantastic. Almost the idea of this British band sailing the seas to go to Italy to make their name. So yeah, good one to start with, The Trip and Caront. And then next up, I've talked about this guy on my channel before. This guy called Czesław Niemen. This is his Mourner's Rhapsody album. Now, he gets referred to as Polish, and I guess he is Polish, but I think he was actually born in Belarus. And this was his, I suppose, or his record company's attempt to break him elsewhere other than Eastern Europe, because he's a big star in Eastern Europe. particularly Poland. But this album was recorded in New York. He had a number of musicians working with him who were not Polish. Michael Urbaniak, the Polish violinist, plays on here, and I love his playing. Great fusion type, jazzy prog violinist. But you've also got John Abercrombie and Steve Kahn on guitars. So some jazz royalty there. And Jan Hammer, oddly, plays drums. I don't really think of Jan Hammer as a drummer, more as a keyboard player, but he plays drums on this album. But I guess Niemen did not need a keyboard player because he's a fantastic keyboard player himself. You know, there's Hammond all over this. There's Fender Rhodes. There's Mellotron, and he also has a fantastic voice. It can sound a little bit. I don't know how to describe it. He sounds more like Neil Diamond than he does Ian Gillan. Let's put it that way. He's got a kind of a baritone type, almost a staginess to his voice, but it's very soulful, very mournful, very emotional. So, don't let that description put you off. He's got a great voice, and this is a superb album. I mean, it is largely a jazz album or jazz-influenced album, but it's most certainly prog as well. The Fender Rhodes on here, the flute that comes in at times, the violin really gives it that kind of experimental fusion feel. And at times there's a sort of angularity to it. It becomes a sort of an angular, jazzy prog at times. I guess when Michael Urbaniak's violin comes in, particularly on the track I Search for Love, that has a real kind of an Arabian vibe to it, I suppose, which is really appealing. Side 2 is one long track. It's the title track, Mourner's Rhapsody, and that kind of starts off with dramatic chimes. I guess they're tubular bells, and there's a men's choir on there, and Czeslaw Niemen's very emotional, soulful voice comes in, and it's really quite a trippy track. It's epic, as you'd expect from a sideline track. There's weird trippy synths on here. Like I say, the choir is in there, really adding to the drama. So I can thoroughly recommend that. I got this from one of my local record shops. It's not my favourite shop, I've got to say. I'm not going to mention them because I don't want to badmouth them. Because it tends to sell more new stuff than second-hand. And their second-hand collection doesn't change very often. Tends to be overpriced. But I went in one day and found this, and they only wanted £5 for it. And I thought, all day long, no problem. Got it home. Hadn't realised that, although it's not marked as a promo copy, it did have like a biography inside, which tells the story of how basically CBS were trying to break Czeslaw Niemen in the West, and had a promo photo as well. So I was really pleased to get a hold of that. And next is an album on one of my favourite labels. I think I mentioned before, Sugarbush. Really great label. They seem to have gone into hibernation. I think the cost of running an independent record label was just, I guess, too prohibitive. And like I say, hibernation rather than extinction. I think they may well rise phoenix light from the ashes at some point. But they have been so good at putting out psych pop, power pop, Americana type albums. And this one is an absolute gem. The band is 8x8. The album's called Inflorescence. First thing to say is 8x8 is a terrible name for a band, because you Google that, you're never going to come up with this band. But the music is fantastic. I love that artwork as well. I think that's beautiful. So yeah, it's a shame to see the record label going to hibernation. I've done my bit to try and keep them afloat. I've got a fair few of their releases, but yeah, a few more to pick up yet. But this one I can recommend. I mean, it comes on that nice sort of, I guess you've got sort of pearlescent type finish vinyl. Inflorescence, pearlescence. Yeah, maybe there's a link there. But this is psych pop. It's I mean, the first track, Stop the Madman. Yeah, it's It's a real lush, woozy, Beach Boys, Pet Sounds influenced Baroque harmony pop. It's a beautiful track. And that definitely sets out their stall, but there's more than just that Beach Boys harmony pop on here. It does get quite psychedelic. There's the odd sort of trippy head swirl of a track. I'm thinking of, it's called Between the Double Curtain. That's definitely got that head swirly kind of thing going on. There's moments where you think, oh, that's quite sort of Stone Roses type bass line, and you get Beach Boys harmonies on here, and there's harpsichord and phased vocals, and it's a beautiful, beautiful listen. I love this album. Sugarbush does seem to put out some really good psychedelic pop albums, and this is no exception. I think the band's from New York. This is the only vinyl release this has had, and sometimes Sugarbush re-released albums that had never had a vinyl issue, all officially done, but this one I think came out concurrently with the CD release. So yeah, you should really check this out. You know, it's great. There's sitar, there's tabla, there's organ, there's beautiful harmonies. It's definitely a winner. So that's 8x8. And then next up is an album by a band. Well, I guess I'd been looking for this album at the right price for quite a long time, and what I didn't want to do was pay postage, overseas postage, because it can get a little bit pricey doing that. And although I checked this album out online, parts of it, I thought that's really interesting, but I wasn't so sold on it that I thought I'm going to bust the bank to get a copy. But when a copy came available in the UK for the right price, had to get it. And I'm so glad I did. This is the Music Asylum and their one and only album, Commit Thyself, which came out on the United Artists label. And yeah, this gets variously described as prog and psych, and it's kind of a bit of both of those things, but more than anything, it's an avant-garde jazz LP to me. Came out in 1970. The production is fantastic. The clarity and the space between instruments is superb, really is. And that's just as well because it is a sit down and listen to the whole thing type of an album. Songs do not really exist on here, even though there are tracks with titles. You're not going to go away whistling any of these tunes. I think it's actually not until the final track, Everyone, which is about a minute and a half long, we think, oh, there's actually some song structure there. The rest of the time, it's avant-garde jazz. There's moments of kind of groovy bachelor pad music on here, but done in a kind of with proggy flourishes, I suppose. The first side is variations on slightly weird jazz, sort of lounge jazz on acid, that kind of thing. But you get to the second side, and the first track on the second side, which is called Plastic People, and for me that's the highlight of this album. Great track. It turns into jazz psych. It becomes very avant-garde. It does start to skirt with psychedelia. In fact, a bit more than skirt. There's definitely some psychedelic elements on there, particularly the kind of gang vocal where they're singing, what is it? Are you plastic people? And yeah, it's almost like a cult is intoning that particular line. Great song. It's got psychedelic vocal effects on there. There are horns, there are trippy piano sounds. It sounds like someone's climbed inside a grand piano and is plucking away at the strings there to give this sort of slightly jarring harp sound. So that's, for me, the best track on here. Coupled with probably the track Garbage, which is very Zappa-esque. The vocal is quite like Frank Zappa, and the song itself feels like it could be something that would fit quite comfortably on Joe's Garage. So yeah, if that's your kind of thing, a bit of avant-garde, proggy, psychedelic jazz, you could definitely do worse. You're not going to pick it up for the cover because that is not an attractive cover, and it looks like the band were never going any going to win any awards for being pin-ups. But music's what counts, and music is great. Really good listen, that one. And then next is now, I've seen other people show on the VC 2 or 3 times, I think, and been wanting to get my own copy, and finally did. And it's the album Everlasting Tributes by Finchley Boys. This originally came out in 1972, although I think the material on it was all recorded between 1968 and 1969. Don't know what the delay was in getting it out, but that's when it was recorded. And this is I'm pretty sure, an unofficial reissue from 1983. They've done a good job of recreating original artwork, which always had that kind of washed out sepia tone to it. Done a good job on the labels as well, which I think replicate the original labels. But this sounds great. It's a really nice pressing of the album. And I love the album sleeve. Just because the band photo just makes them look like such badasses. They look like wild men living in the woods who've just kind of, I don't know, broken into a barn or something for a bit of warmth. But yeah, love it. And the music is great. They're from Champaign, Illinois. And this is a heavy blues psych album. The emphasis on the blues and on the psych. It's heavy bluesy psych. It's got smoking guitar throughout. The vocals aren't the strongest. Sound almost like they're just off key quite a bit of the time, but somehow it doesn't matter because it just enhances that slightly stoned feel to the whole album. And in fact, on the second track, Swelling Waters, the vocal reminds me almost of a post-punk vocal. I don't know, you'd have to hear it to see what I mean, I guess. But, you know, it's the only track where I get that impression. But, yeah, it definitely has this slightly spare post-punk feel to the vocal. And that track has a real rambling, psychedelic quality to it. I mean, elsewhere you've got acid fried guitar and some pretty heavy stuff. The track Outcast is just so Hendrix-like. The vocal and the guitar, very Jimi Hendrix influenced. I say it's acid fried guitar. It's overdriven fuzz throughout. Busy, clattering Mitch Mitchell style drums. Love it. Really good track. But for me, probably the highlight on here is the final track, Restrictions, which it's heavy fuzz. It's got buzzsaw guitars, and it's really got a feel almost like a cross between, I don't know, the Stooges and Black Sabbath. Probably the heaviest track on here, and it sounds like the band's kind of playing their influences through a brown acid blender. It's really something. So yeah, believe the hype. This is a really good album, and if you can pick up a copy, even an unofficial copy like this, you should definitely do it. Okay, where are we at? 2 more. This is a guy who I discovered this year, and I say discovered, I've actually seen his albums before. There's one album of his I particularly wanted because I thought the art was fantastic. I'm not showing that one today. I'll show it another time maybe. But had no idea what he sounded like. But I thought if the music's anything as good as the artwork, I should pick that up. And as it is, I've picked up 3 of his albums this year. And this is his debut. It's Martin Bryley and Fear of the Unknown. And again, I love the artwork on there. Slightly kind of surreal look to it. And this guy, he's an English musician. He released his debut in 1981, but he'd previously been a member of Greenslade and in fact played on their Time and Tide album. He's also been in Hunter's touring band and recorded with him as well. And I think he's had his songs recorded by people like Pat Benatar. So this is not some newbie who didn't really know what he was doing. And I guess he had a fair bit of his own material he really wanted to get down on vinyl. And I love this album. It's completely in my ballpark. It's just what I love. It's quirky, progressive pop. Brings to mind Brian Prothero, who I've mentioned before, who another English guy who's put out a handful of really quirky, intelligent pop albums. So I guess if you like, who would I say? If you like Supertramp, if you like Kayak, if you like The Motors, if you like Pilot, they're all artists who are very much in a similar vein to this. Martin Bryley's lyrics are fantastic. They're really quirky. They're really cynical. They really make you think. The delivery is great. The musicianship is fantastic on here. Yes, it's pop, but it's played by rock musicians who really know what they're doing. In fact, the guitarist on here at times, his guitar tone is a dead ringer for Brian May from Queen. I love this album. It's really hard to pick out favourite tracks, I've got to say. The third track on the first side, I feel like a milkshake perhaps. It has that Brian May guitar sound to it. It's quirky, new wave, power pop, piano, synths, brilliant stuff. Second track, I think, on side 2, I Don't Feel Better. It kind of sounds like Phil Collins singing early Joe Jackson song backed by Pilot. And in fact, Martin Bryley's voice does sound like a bit of a cross between Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel at times. And I know the words Phil and Collins can sometimes send people running from the room, but I have no problem with Phil Collins as long as the music is good. He's not doing dreadful Motown covers. I'm up for a bit of Phil Collins, and this is great, intelligent pop. Probably better than anything that Phil Collins put out after Face Value, to be honest. This was another one that I picked up cheap. I got it online, and the vendor described it very accurately, right down to the corner cut. What he didn't mention, and this was a bonus, was that although it's not marked as a promo, it's got a promo photo and a band biography again. So doing quite well for getting biographies and promos out of this lot. But yeah, it's definitely one that's worth checking out. Production's great, songwriting's great, lyrics are superb. It's got everything going for it. Martin Bryley. Okay, and finally, this is now I haven't had for very long. Played it a couple of times, maybe 3 times. So I've got some initial impressions. And it's another great listen. I mean, these are all great listens. I'm not going to show crap generally, but it's a band called Rock Kicks and their Inside album. And I must admit, if I saw that or if the average person saw that in a record shop, they might pass it over. I'm a bit of a sucker for bad facial hair and badly dressed guys in bands in the 70s and early 80s, though. So I tend to think if they're dressing that badly and look that bad, then they're probably putting all their efforts into the music. And I'm right, because this is a really good album. I love it. I mean, the sleeve is pretty awful. And the band Rock Kicks, they decide to interpret the band name very literally on the back sleeve. But this, it's a proper sort of Midwestern, I don't know whether from the Midwest, but it's got that feel to a Midwestern hard rock album from 1977, I think this came out. And it's got that feel of Stars and who else? Early Kiss, I suppose, but with quite a southern rock feel as well. There's quite a sort of Molly Hatchett's Danny Joe Brown feel to the vocalist. I love it. Like I say, I'm not sure I can pick out individual tracks as yet, but if you're into Stars, Early Kiss, that whole Midwestern sort of 70s hard rock sound, you're likely to really enjoy this. Songs are well written, musicianship is great, and it's produced by Derek Lawrence, who he produced the first 3 Deep Purple albums, I think. He also produced Argus by Wishbone Ash. I think he's produced Legs Diamond and Angel as well in the past. So the guy knows what he's doing, and this is a really good sounding album, really in your face, energetic hard rock album. So do not sleep on it if you see it. Don't be put off by the sleeve. It's a really, really good listen. Okay, so that's my lot for now. I probably won't get another video out before Christmas and New Year, so have a good Christmas, have a great New Year, and I will try and get a kind of roundup of the year type video out sometime in 2024, early in 24, January. I'm not talking like in the summer or anything, but take care. See you soon.